Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the first 23 verses of Daniel's second chapter. And before we do our verse-by-verse commentary and analysis, we just want to review what happened in the first chapter. We read of Daniel, who is the human protagonist, though it is disputable that he was the author of the book which bears his name, and three Hebrew companions of his are taken captive by the king of Babylon, and they are given Babylonian names. The three companions are referred to henceforth throughout as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but Daniel was given the name Belshazzar, even though he's referred to mostly as Daniel throughout. So the temptation that this conquering people that had captivated them were trying to impose their culture on them, and this Daniel resisted. He refused to eat of the king's dainties and delicacies, determined to maintain the Jewish law, dietary law. And so he does this and offers an experiment, the results of which he's going to be noticeably better looking and healthier than those who are given the king's delicacies. And so he sort of wins over the eunuchs and the overseers. Daniel is a winning personality, which is attractive to people in power whom he had encountered by providence. He had been sent for their special purpose by Yahweh to preserve and protect the covenant people even whilst in captivity. And he eventually wins over the king, who notices him excel all the wisdom and understanding of everyone else in his employ. But it's not until this chapter that we read that he is elevated to prime minister, or the functional equivalent of that. And so in the opening verse of the second chapter, we read, "And in the second year of the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him." The second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign would have been 603 BM before Messiah. He ascended to the throne in 605, and he inherited the throne from his predecessor Belshazzar, who would have been responsible for the elimination of Assyria in 612 BM. That's when Assyria was displaced as the Asian superpower, so all that was left was to move on Egypt. Nebuchadnezzar does that, not just yet, he does that in the year 598 BM, and he eventually conquers Judah and Jerusalem and destroys the temple and the city and transplants all the people except the poorest of the poor captive in 586. So there were waves in which these exiles came. Daniel probably came in 606 BM, which would have meant that the original king was Belshazzar, but Ezekiel was taken captive in 597 BM, but the majority of the captivity and the exile would be 586, when the city of Jerusalem was devastated and razed. But the dream we read about actually has historical significance, though we don't read of any of the details of the dream. We read that he had a dream, and he's troubled by it. He knows it means something. He doesn't quite know what he means. He has a sense that it's significant for him, but he's unable to even remember it, so that makes him all the more disturbed, as we read. "And the king gave orders to call the magicians and the astrologers and the practicers of witchcraft and the Chaldeans to declare to the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king." These would have been practitioners of forbidden practices in Israelite land. Magic is a form of manipulation and idolatry. Astrology places faith in the signs of the heavens, but that's a misplaced faith, as declared, because Yahweh, who made the stars, is clearly greater than the stars. And witchcraft was tantamount to the sin of rebellion in 1 Samuel 15:13. 23, and the Chaldeans, that would have been the ethnic people, the ethnic rulers of Babylon at this time. So there were various phases of Babylonian history. These were a different ethnic group than the Empire of Hammurabi, for example. But these would have been the Chaldean wise men, and they're summoned and stand before the king, who proceeds to tell them. And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream. So they know he had a dream, and they know that he doesn't know what it is or what it was about. He can't recall any detail, therefore adding another layer to the troubling nature of it. And the Chaldean spoke to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Relate the dream to your servants, and we shall reveal the interpretation. So from this verse on to the chapter 7, the book of Daniel is written in Aramaic, which by the New Testament time would have been the common tongue of the ordinary Jew. And the Assyrians invented it as sort of the international language of business and diplomacy. The Babylonians had carried it on and remained a linguistic force, at least until even after the Romans came, they were still speaking it. But they're asking him to tell him what the dream is about in order for them to make sense of it. They have to know what it is because it wasn't beyond these people's capacity or these practitioners' capacity to interpret dreams, but it was beyond their power to interpret them from a blank slate. The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream and its interpretation to me, your limbs shall be taken from you, and your house made dunghills. So he's so troubled by it that he's resorting to threats, and he was a king of absolute power, so all he had to do was order it to be done, and it would be done. There would be devastation and ruin. Both their bodies and their homes would be brought to the ground and torn apart if they failed to tell him this dream, what it was that he can't even remember, and not only that, but interpret its meaning. So he's laying the lines, the stakes couldn't be higher. Their very lives are in jeopardy. If no one answers it, he's going to issue a mass execution against all the astrologers, magicians, etc. in his employ if none of them are able to answer it. But if you reveal the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive gifts and rewards and great esteem from me. So reveal to me the dream and its interpretations. So after resorting to negative threats, he does positive coercions by abounding them in gifts and rewards and exaltation in his empire from him. And so he's troubled by it, but he is also so disturbed that he knows that he's disturbed because he knows not what it was or what it means. All he remembers is the lingering feeling of fear, which didn't depart him even as the details of the dreams did. So he'd be so relieved to alleviate the confusion which is causing this fear and this troubling that he's going to reward richly anyone who can tell him it and interpret it for him. They answered again and said, Let the king relate to his servants the dream, and we shall reveal its interpretation. So they're basically repeating themselves before he had issued the threat. They're asking him to tell him what the dream, the details were, the sequence of events as they transpired, but the king doesn't know, but he is deadly serious, literally deadly serious about his want and desire to have it, the meaning untold by someone, anyone. The king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time because you see that my decision is firm. So he accuses them of stalling for time, conspiring for more time because they knew and understood that his resolve to execute them and destroy their homes was fixed and firmed and settled. So he accuses them of stalling for time, and he is motivated by an immediate urgency for the interpretation of this dream, which he can't even remember. If you make not known the dream to me, there is only one decree for you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. So relate the dream to me, then I shall know that you shall reveal its interpretation for me. So there's a lot to digest in that 9th verse. He's saying that it's going to be a universal prescriptive punishment of a mass execution of all the astrologers, magicians, purveyors of esoteric knowledge that were in his employ. If none of them can answer, all of them must die. And he accuses them of trying to deceive and manipulate him by stalling for time. But he repeats his desire and request to demand and command to have the dream and its interpretation made known to him. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, "There is no one on earth who is able to reveal the matter of the king, because no king, master, or ruler has ever asked a matter like this of any magician or astrologer or Chaldean." So kings, dreams were elevated into significance in the ancient world, and we certainly do reveal Yahweh communicating not only to Jews from Joseph and Abraham and Jacob, and also to pagans such as the king Abimelech and the Pharaoh's cupbearer and the Pharaoh himself, and this is only in the book of Genesis. But no king, but the potential for demonic influence in our dream is entirely possible. So dreams in themselves with revelatory significance have to be determined in light of the character and the will and the word of the Almighty, else it is of Satan. But they're complaining, they're protesting because this is something no king had ever asked before. Certainly kings, the dreams of a king would have had attached exalted significance above the ordinary, because their lives were considered more significant than the commoners or ordinary people, and they're implying subtly that this is an unreasonable request and it's never been done before. Why us? Why should we lose our lives just because you're troubled by a dream you can't even remember that we could interpret for you if you just gave us some details or the sequence of events? And the matter that the king is asking is difficult, and there is no other who is able to reveal it to the king except the mighty ones, whose dwelling is not with flesh. So by their own words, the astrologers and the magicians and the Chaldean, the wise men, expose the fallacy of their own practice. It is unable to do what the king wants it to do, and no one apart. They're polytheistic, so they refer to mighty ones, familiarly translated as gods, and they I guess they did their much of their work and practice apart from any faith in these gods, but Daniel has the intimate connection with the one, the true, the living, the real, and the only Elohim that none of them have. Because of this, the king was enraged and very wroth, and gave orders to destroy all the wise ones of Babylon. So every wise person whose wisdom was insufficient to answer his most perplexing dilemma was ordered executed in mass. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the chief of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise ones of Babylon. So while the head of the leader of the king's personal bodyguard was en route to order issue out the order decree of mass execution, Providence had placed Daniel in his path, and he did it with wisdom. Daniel was a wise man, we read as early as 117, and he's going to intervene providentially to not only reveal the meaning of the dream, which is of significance not just for the king and the present generation itself. It is very, very relevant to what has transpired in history since then and what awaits us, what has not transpired yet. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's officer, "Why is the decree from the king so urgent?" So Arioch made the decision known to Daniel. So Daniel is a reasonable man, and he's asking why is he resorting to such an extremity so fast. He's going to deploy himself of the human resources he is accustomed to rely on, and there are going to be none of him left, all because he's angered and wrath because he can't figure out the thing, he can't remember it, and he certainly doesn't know what it means. And Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time, and he would show the king the interpretation. So Daniel was obviously not present when he summoned all the native spiritist and religionist and magicians, etc. But he did have access. We read that he was beloved of the king because his wisdom and understanding excelled any of the others tenfold. You read towards the tail end of the first chapter. So he's familiar with the court protocol. He does have access to the king's ear and affection. So he goes in to ask him the time, to compel him to relent on his resolve to do something that's going to be to no one's advantage, either him or the men he's going to kill, his own. Then Daniel went to his house and made the decision known to Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. So he returned home, having gone to the court, the palace. He went to his house, and he approached, we can imagine, with the spirit and ethos of Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turned away wrath. This king was seething on the brink of rage, so much so that he is determined to kill all the wise men in his employ, until a wise man who hadn't even considered steps up and says, I can do but I'm going to need time. I'm going to need to consult someone outside of myself for the answer to what this prayer means. And this translation mostly retains the Hebrew original, so those are better known. The companions, the three, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are listed here as Ananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, to seek mercy from the Elah of the heavens concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions should not perish with the rest of the wise ones of Babel. So their lives were on the line. They were praying for an answer that could spare not only their own lives, but that of others, because this king meant business. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't messing around. He meant what he said. He was determined to act on his impulsively arrived at decision to execute. He's so governed by his fear and uncertainty that he's resorting to irrational actions. And so their lives, as much as the native wise ones, would have been in perish, and they ask for mercy from the man upstairs, the Elah of the heavens, who alone can reveal the secret to them. And Daniel and his three companions' approach are instructive to contemplate and beneficial to emulate whenever crisis faces us. Oftentimes we're so overwhelmed that we don't make time and space for prayer. That is something we should always do. Prayer is a foolproof formula for all of our dilemmas, all of our anxieties, all of our worries, all of our troubles. There's one thing you can't do enough of, and that is prayer within a reasonable moderate. Obviously, you can't spend every waking hour of every day and every second in it in prayer. You would deprive yourself of sleep and food, but there's always room for more prayer. No matter how much you're praying right now, a little more can't hurt and can in fact help. Then the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, and Daniel blessed the Ella of the heavens. So he asked and he received. He had he had a hotline to heaven, which he approached in faith and humility. He asked for mercy first to reveal this secret, this mystery, and all of a sudden it's going to be revealed to him in response to, in the form of a night vision. So that could be either a dream or a vision, and the two are distinct in forms of revelatory communications, and that visions are conscious visions. They see a physical manifestation of an angel, or hear the voice of one, or even divine entities themselves. But night vision could be interpreted, I'm not quite sure, as a dream, where where Elohim communicates through the dreamer in his dream. And he responds with gratitude. He blesses him because he knows that his life is going to be spared. The mystery makes sense. It's from Elohim. He does not lie. He cannot contradict himself. He's not going to give his trustworthy and faithful servant faulty information that's going to result in his own execution along with all the others. Daniel responded and said, "Blessed be the name of Elah forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. Wisdom and might are two of his attributes which belong to him in superabundance. There are words for the unlimited and infinite scope of his wisdom and might, which are omniscience and omnipotence, respectively." And again, Daniel has an attitude of gratitude. He blesses the name, which represents the character and nature of Elah. So by blessing the name, he's blessing himself. And he is the source of all his wisdom. He does not take credit for answering him, but he uses the opportunity to give witness to the Elohim who can reveal all secrets to all seekers. And he changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who possess understanding. Now, the providential arrangement of kings and their passage and succession and reign is incidentally going to come into play in the portion we're not going to read today, but we'll probably do a lesson after this of Daniel's interpretation of the dream. Thus far, we don't even have any of the details, but we do know with the gift of hindsight that it is about the progression of geopolitical imperial empires, which ultimately crash and crumble, leaving way to the kingdom which lasts, that of the millennial kingdom of the Messiah. And he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who possess understanding. Understanding is a somewhat higher level of knowledge than knowledge itself. If knowledge is the ability to figure things out, understanding is the ability to put the pieces of the puzzle all together. He reveals deep and secret matters. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells in him. So there's nothing he does not know. There's nothing he cannot know. There is nothing we can teach him, because he is an omniscient, all-knowing being, and he can all knowledge. Our intellectual capacities come from him. He is an intelligent creator who shares some of his attributes in limited and finite doses with some of his creatures, and we are thinking beings, or rational beings, distinct from the animals. and there is nothing that can remain long hidden in darkness that he doesn't instantly penetrate, because he is light, and his light always dispels the darkness wherever it goes. I thank you and praise you, O Ella of my fathers, that you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what was asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter. So he closes with repeating his attitude of gratitude, which so saturates him that he does it a second time, and what he has in himself he gives to others in limited and finite doses. So he is wise, he is mighty. He shared some of that wisdom and might to the appropriate or necessary extent with Daniel that would enable him to approach the king and answer his question and settle his dilemma, because he now knows what the great mystery was. He had a blank slate. He knew that no one else knew it, but Elohim, the man upstairs, remembers and tells him not only that in the interpretation. So we read that he prayed for the secret to be manifest or made known to him, and that prayer was answered. And what does he do after he receives the answer to the prayer? We read of a recorded prayer. The contents of the prayer before the prayer we just read are not recorded. So that is the appropriate response when we receive answers to our prayer, is to thank him and to dwell on his character and just exalt him in all his magnificence for all that he is and all that he does. And that's all the time we have for today. We're definitely going to do sometime soon a successor from this same chapter. We haven't even learned anything of the dreams, but always want them leaving more. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.